Today's episode is with a guy who's kicked my butt on more than one occasions, in the gym that is. He's a health and wellness wiseman, and I had a blast in today's conversation. Today's episode is with Jake Giamoni. Before you came in, I had to do a little Google research, though, on Mr. Jake. And I had no idea that you did some UFC fighting.
I did. Well, don't give me too much credit. Yeah. The UFC is the highest
UFC,
level organization. I did not make it anywhere close to that, but I did do a couple MMA fights. Yeah. So it's a cool thing to say I've done.
For sure.
I'm super proud of it. I was a collegiate wrestler. I wrestled at a pretty high level at the NCAA tournament, all that stuff.
Yeah, because that's what I always knew, because you had the history, you did pretty well.
So from a credential perspective, I still think that takes the cake. But in terms of intensity and something that was like a really life-changing experience, doing an MMA fight, it's as crazy as you might think.
For sure. Was that always in your mind when you were wrestling, that like, I want to give that a go, or that could be the career?
It's pretty natural to at least be interested in that, because what a lot of people don't realize about wrestling is that unless you're going to be an Olympian, there's really like collegiate wrestling is essentially like the pros.
For sure.
There's really no, unless you're going to be the Olympian, which is like 8 total people per Olympics, very, very small amount of people. The only next thing you could do, you can approach jiu-jitsu, which is not like usually going to be like a money-making thing very much. And then MMA would be like kind of the only thing where you could like, if you did approach it all the way, you could like actually make some money and make a career out of that. Obviously only a few people do, but it's really natural to want to try 100%. That out. And it was interesting to me, but I did have like a few years after I finished my wrestling career.
Got it.
Took a few years where I didn't really approach it, and then I kind of jumped back in. I was really craving that. And it was just like, for me, I only did 2 fights. It really was kind of like bucket list, as opposed to like, I'm going to do this and run it all the way through.
Yeah.
And just the way that myself, and especially a lot of athletes are, like when I was training MMA, I was like all in. So like if I would have continued doing that, like I'd probably be nowhere near where I am in my career, and I probably also wouldn't have made the UFC. So it would have been bad in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I 100% committed for a few fights. Had 2 wins. I felt really good about my performance.
For sure.
And it's super intense though, but just going to like the actual events, like I did it in Durham, and the place is called the Durham Armory.
Okay.
It's about as, it's like something out of a movie scene. It's like all the fans are like right up on you. Obviously they like lock the cage behind you. You get like your walkout music, but it's like, I would imagine it's almost as intense as anything, because it's like a couple thousand people, and I would say like 500 of them were there for me, so that's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So I still was a trainer at that point, so I had like this big reach of a lot of people. I had like the squad. So definitely nerve-wracking, but
how did you have to change up your training from what you were doing in school to do that? Was it a major adjustment for you to go from?
So the good news is wrestling kind of is still one of the biggest bases for MMA.
The grappling nature of it?
Exactly. So if you can take somebody to the ground, they can't really, it's really hard for them to knock you out. They can tap you out. But so I knew my wrestling was going to be my base. You just want to get good enough at the other stuff on the amateur level to be like, I'm not going to get knocked out before I take this person to the ground.
So your game plan was basically like get him to the ground.
Get him to the ground
as soon as I can.
So my first fight, I thought I would stand up a little bit just because it's like exciting to like throw some punches. And like as soon as the guy approached me, I just went straight for a takedown. Nice. It's just like you go instantly to what you know. And then the second fight, I promised myself I would throw a few blows before I took him down. So I hit the dude with like a big right hook, and then I went for a takedown. Then we were on the ground. But I did land a lot of blows once we were on the ground. So it's still kind of crazy. But I will say, like, my own personality type, like, I didn't really love the idea, especially like I dominated my fights pretty well. Like I didn't really love the feeling of like, oh, I'm like beating the crap out of this person. It's like a person I don't know. They seem like nice guys. I'm like, I don't really love the idea. So like that was actually part of my, well, there's 2 sides of it. Obviously, I don't want to get the crap beat out of me. Luckily, I didn't in either of those 2 first fights. So I'm like, I came out unscathed. That's number 1. But number 2 being like, I didn't really love like beating the crap out of somebody. Like I like, it's like, I don't have anything against this dude. I think it takes a special type of person for sport to like, I could really hurt this person.
Crazy.
And so my wife was really scared before I did my MMA fight, and this is kind of crazy, but the guy right before that, and we were early on in our relationship at this time. She was not into it at all, but she was like going to be supportive.
Okay.
The guy right before I fought, he had to be defibrillated on the fight before me. No so he literally was like, his heart stopped. Jeez. The guy slammed him
from a slam.
Holy You'll see at amateur levels, people get hurt more at amateur levels because the competition's a little wider. You might see somebody like myself that's a Division I wrestler,
that's right,
wrestling fighting a dude that's like trained out of his garage.
Oh wow,
you know what I mean? They try to pair it up.
So the tournaments are kind of open.
It's like
call,
they try to say at least they don't want to let like a random dude come in, but like you don't need to prove too much about how good you are. And then they might like, so my first fight, I have no fights versus other dude that has no fights, but my no fights was I've been a combat athlete since I was 6 years old, and his is like I train out of my garage, right? So
and that Johnny wasn't down the street. Exactly, we got the mats out.
Exactly. So you'll see some ass whippings.
Holy shit!
You'll see bigger ass whippings than in the UFC. Like it's pretty. Like you'll see some big knockouts and stuff like that, but it's usually much closer competition. So you actually don't see it get like super wild like that as much.
Who were you training with to get into that?
I was training with Brandon Garner. He's the owner of Gracie Raleigh. So the nice thing is he actually almost made the UFC himself, and he was a good MMA fighter, but he's like exactly like my size. We were already friends. So like he was like my training partner and my coach.
I feel like that's such a game changer.
That worked out really well. And he like is one of those dudes that like he doesn't really he was like more in his prime then. We're both a little older now, but like he wouldn't take it easy on me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
you did
fun.
You did the two fights.
Yeah.
And then it was like I got my fill, or like what was the headspace?
It was like, I mean, I'll be totally
one?
honest. I'll even throw myself under the bus here. The competition was about to raise a little bit, and it's like I'm gonna need to like fully dedicate myself. And like these next two dudes, like I didn't get hit once in my first two fights.
Wow.
I'm like, I wasn't scared of that, but I'm like, these other dudes can like knock me the hell out because they're gonna like raise you up in competition real quick. And I'm like, just sit back and like, did I get enough out of this in terms of like just fulfillment? Where I don't really want to risk my body. I was just like, I think I'm good.
Wow. Jeez, because like the second you like take your foot off the gas all the way, it's like you leave that little that room for error,
100%,
and that could be lights out.
And I definitely heard I've heard Joe Rogan say this a lot, and it resonated with me. He's like, the second you feel like you have any doubt of whether like you want to go out there and like go 100% to like hurt this other person, because that is like the job
for sure,
then if you have any doubt about that, then you should stop, because the other person might be that person that's really trying to hurt you, and if you have any hesitation whatsoever, then you're gonna get fucked up.
You're a nice guy. I don't want to
exactly. So I started to feel that, like I'm like, I didn't really love hurting these other dudes. So the second you start thinking that, you're like, I'm probably good.
No, I respect that. What was the with where you're at now versus that, like how was your or what was the nutrition like when you were in college versus your UFC versus now? I mean, did you guys get any guidance?
So I wrestled at NC State, which is a high level program, but we got like almost no guidance.
Really?
And obviously, there's like a huge factor in those sports, which is cutting weight. And you pretty much, what makes those sports kind of beautiful, but also bad. I have a nephew that's wrestling right now. It's good and bad, is like it puts so much onus on like the athlete to be like, you just need to show up tomorrow on weight. We're not really going to give you a lot of guidance a lot of times, because the powers that be just don't really have the knowledge, honestly. But what is really beneficial, and it's why you'll see a lot of people that do those sports, especially wrestling at a young age, have a lot of success, is that like 11 years old, they might start cutting weight. Bad for the body, but they're like, hey, 11-year-old, you need to show up on weight tomorrow, and we're going to be disappointed in you if you don't make it. So figure it out. And that really does instill a lot of like self-reliance. Like you're like, I just need to figure it out. Like most kids at that age don't have to do a lot of that. Like 100%. Where it's like they're usually being guided.
What are you doing on your own that's like just up to you?
Not much. So it's like if you wake up, you're overweight, it might be like, I need to set my alarm for, and again, this is probably more like high school, but it's like I need to set my alarm for 5 a.m. because I need to be on weight later on today. So like that aspect is amazing for building like a strong-minded human. But the negative is like you're not supposed to starve yourself when you're 15 years old. It's not that good for you. So it's like I don't really recommend it.
What was your headspace in terms of picking the weight class? Was it just the lowest you could go?
Quite often what tends to happen is usually you're gonna go about as low as you can go and still feel your best. I don't necessarily know if I agree that always is what should happen, but that's typically what happens. And then a lot of times weight cutting happens in that sport because it's like where there's only one starter at each weight class. So let's just say my natural weight's 150, but the only spot for me is 133 pounds or whatever. Like I'm like, well, I want to wrestle, so that's my spot. Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
So
that's
a big
of the
it's
team.
A big factor. It's
Dude,
a big factor.
My wrestling coach in high school, when the only like weight guidance he ever gave us was he had like these horse multivitamin pills, and he'd be like, if you take this, you boys don't even need to eat. Just take this and drink water. So we're peeing like Gatorade yellow, trying to get down to weight.
I would like to think that at the college level, it's come a long way since then, but I guarantee at like the high school level, it's still just like kind of like they it's a lot to expect of like high school coaches who are getting paid like $2,000. Like you would love to hope they would be digging in and really, and there's certainly coaches that do, but the average high school coach is like, you know what I mean? If at best, hopefully
side hustle or just their after work thing.
Hopefully they're an expert in the sport. You can't expect them to be an expert at like strength training and nutrition. Like that person, if they were expert at all that, they should get paid 20 times that amount, right?
Exactly. I mean, I don't even know what a high school
it would be interesting, like as a parent though, because it's like you expect a lot out of these people, and I'm not a parent yet, but I think that's going to be tough for me. Where it's like you want your kids to be guided in a way where it's like, hey, if you're going to tell my kid to cut weight, you probably want to help them how to do it. And it's like, no, that's not really the expectation.
No,
it's like,
not at all.
No.
Man, do you think wrestling will ever break into prime time?
I don't. I think MMA will always overtake it.
Yeah. Because I feel like I've seen Jordan Burroughs. They try to do some of those like showcase matches or
There's
something.
definitely bigger. So like I think within the niche, those guys are getting paid a little bit more. There's a lot more. Social media has been great for it.
Yeah.
Makes me a little sad because I was doing this 20 years ago. Now there's like this.
You can build your personal brand around it.
You can build your personal brand.
Content.
Like I probably would have been at least made a couple showings on some of these like really big Instagram accounts and all of that stuff. But back then it was like you were doing it just all for the love. Like 100%. Nobody really knew other than like that very small circle. So I think within that circle, there's a lot more popularity. But typically it's like you're a wrestling fan or you're not. There's not a lot of people that dabble in it. So I think it'll always be around, but I don't think mainstream's probably not going to happen. Yeah.
It's funny because like there's some sports in primetime that I don't even jam with at all, right? And like wrestling to me is just such like.
Well, they got rid of wrestling in the Olympics for one Olympic session, and there was like a big pushback. But that is like there's a really hard argument. Like that's silly. Like wrestling, it's like okay, it's one thing if you're saying people shouldn't be getting paid the big bucks, but like that's like one of the oldest sports. It's like about as true of athletic competition as you can get. It's like so much so physical. Yeah. And then like some of these sports that they're bringing in instead, it's like I think everybody, including people outside of wrestling, were like, no, that's not the one you remove. Yeah. So they only got rid of it for one Olympics and they brought it back.
Oh, I didn't realize that was just like a one.
It was
one thing.
One, yeah.
But like, let's be real. If you're gonna have like flag football, you got to have
100%,
wrestling. You know,
like, I mean, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but flag football is not even the worst. There's some ones that are like, you're gonna take away this mano a mano, two dudes just like duking it out.
Air rifle target
there we
shooting.
Go.
You know,
now we're talking. Exactly. Yeah.
Like, these guys are really the premier athletes of the world today.
100%. Yeah.
Dude, so you were doing the wrestling and the fighting thing, but while you were fighting, were you also in training, and that was the job while the fighting
so that was like
on?
my early years of personal training.
Yeah.
I was just at the local gym, O2 Fitness, just like kind of like getting my feet in there. But it was like at that point I knew that was going to be my path, but I was definitely early on as a trainer. Like I had a good business, but it was one of those things, as I noted, that like, you know, if I would have paid too much attention, it was hard for me to balance those two. Like I wasn't giving as much attention to my clients as they probably needed in terms of mental energy, because you're just 100%. So physically exhausted.
Yeah, if you're training and trying to like, I can only imagine.
It's challenging.
Be wrecked coming out of a morning workout. Trying to like,
and it's like pretty much has to. You're basically in MMA. You're training for multiple sports at the same time. So you essentially almost have to have like separate practices. Yeah, I'm going to work on jiu-jitsu. I'm going to work on wrestling. I'm going to work on striking. You can't really cram that into like one session. You have to kind of separate it. So you're almost always training at least a couple times a day.
Oh, interesting. 2 or 3 days just to have enough focus on one thing.
Exactly.
Dang, man. So
no, it's a badass sport. Days. It's a badass sport. Yeah. Yeah, but it's like, you do learn like I'm just a little bit over 40 now, that like at that age, it was a perfect time for me. Like I had the energy for it. But like, it's like at that time, I could make that work, but you pretty much have to kind of commit to that. Like doing that and then having like your main job and doing both at the same time, it's just like something's going to slack.
For sure. Dude, it's funny thinking about like the different sort of, I guess, roles or like experiences you've had in fitness. Because I would imagine like the philosophies and the stuff that you have today are almost, would you say, polar opposites from what you had to do the sports?
A lot of it, yeah. And it's been a slow evolution from, it moved pretty quickly too, because I always was working with the general public. So I was able to notice early, and it's very challenging for people that are athletes or were athletes that then get into training to look at their clients in a different light than somebody that's training for a sport that's like really fully committed to that, right? There's obviously certain athletes that you have to kind of pull teeth to get them to do things, but in general, athletes like show up, do their thing. Sure, some people work harder than others. Most people in the general fitness space that are just trying to get more fit, like it is a challenge for them every day to like do what they need to do. Some people can't.
That's the hardest part of your day.
It's the hardest part. So you have to look at it as a trainer, and I was able to adapt to that pretty early, that I need to look at this person in a very different way and set different expectations. And we need to start way smaller and understand that like some of these small wins are really valuable, as opposed to like if I was to look at it, put that same mind frame around looking at an athlete, I'd be like, dude, step it up. Like I can't get you to get to the gym a couple of days. Exactly. Like, 100%. So you have to just, you have to totally shift your mind state. I'm actually onboarding a couple of people to our team right now, and one of them is an ex-athlete, and he seems to have a good grasp on it already. But like I always have these conversations, like you need to look at the people that you're training in a very different way. Like many of them are having a really hard time. They're balancing a lot of things. This is not the main thing they're focused on. Like an athlete, that's their main thing. Like a college athlete, it's like school school and sports, like your job. For them, for the average person that's coming into the gym, that's just like one little piece of their day that they're many times like really struggling. They want to do it, but it's hard, right?
Well, I mean, I can just anecdotally go off of that, because that's what we were talking about even before we jumped on here, was you're asking about like, well, what are you doing just to get your workouts in? And I was like, man, I had to get the habit back. Because 2 years ago, it was just like, if I'm working, that's productivity. Food is just what's fast and easy. I need more hours on the laptop or whatever. And I came into January and was just like, do something to get you back in there time and time again. And that was just easy. Schedule the workout on your phone, get in there, whatever it may be. But that was sauna workouts, calorie counting culture, and then you woke me up. I think it was what we were talking about. Someone put a post up and was like, calories are not.
I'm gonna take credit for it.
Yeah, I think you should. And that was the wake up call. Like, dude, get in the gym. Like, get weights. Get under something that's actually gonna give you a little.
And
more.
we chatted about it a little bit. Like, I really empathize with why people have. They essentially are misinformed about like what is going to help them get from point A to point B. And a lot of that is just truly like misinformation out there. Some of it intentionally put out there. Some of it actually just misguided professionals that think they're helping people that just really have not done their due diligence. And then some of it is just more like innate. Like we think that it's natural to think that if I want to shed some body fat, that I want to get sweaty and I want to feel exhausted at the end of my workout and I want to burn calories. Like honestly, that actually makes more sense in most people's brains. Like I understand why that makes sense in most people's brains, as opposed to the better approach would be to do strength training where you're not moving super quickly. Maybe at the end of your workout, you're not even super sweaty.
Exactly.
And how could that possibly be better for me? And it doesn't mean that it's one or the other, but the base of that program, kind of no matter what the goal is, but especially with fat loss, like still the base of the program, strength training. And that's like kind of, what we do at Heat at the gym that I own. And it's like, that we just try to convince people. It's like, oh, you have this goal. There's still going to be strength training at the heart of it. And then we kind of branch off, and there's definitely like individual routes you would go based on goals, but it's like almost never is it like, oh, you have this super special goal. Oh yeah, no strength training. It's like never the case. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's intentional or just a part of how this business would operate, but it was like, the app tracks your calories. There's scales in the bathroom. So you're looking at like a 3 or 4 pound weight loss after a 30, 45 minute workout. And you're like, oh, I'm losing weight. And then like the leaderboard is like, oh, you're number 8. How do you get, and it's, these thousands of calories. So
they understand what they're doing. And again, I think like it always depends on the business. I can usually tell if I look at it, like how much of it is like intentionally misleading and how much of it is like
definitely
the people at the top, like truly like just have not, like they believe their own BS for lack of a better word.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Maybe it's not like ill will.
Yeah.
And I think it's like kind of 50-50.
I know,
I think it's kind of 50-50.
Yeah.
They're both bad though, right? If you're going to be running a business that's centered on fitness and you just don't understand it, that's bad, right? But maybe worse is I do understand it, but I'm going to push this out there to people because I know it's going to work and it's going to make me money.
But still, neither
both pretty bad. Yeah, both pretty bad.
So that philosophy is so interesting to me because I think, like you said, people miss on that. I mean, what else goes into that sort of like core philosophy for you for an everyday person?
So we talked about it. We really do believe that the only reason you wouldn't be doing strength training with everybody and that everybody shouldn't be doing it would be like somebody that says like, I absolutely hate this. The only reason you would ever adapt from that program is just because somebody just won't do it. The only reason you'd ever adapt away from the most optimal thing anytime is if the second most optimal thing is something they'll do, because the most important thing is that they'll actually do it.
100%.
So somebody's like, I'll only do cardio. And no matter what you do, how you manipulate it, that's the only thing they're going to do. Well, they will be healthier doing just cardio than if they did nothing.
Got it.
But outside of those small outliers, which is not a lot of people, because if they understood strength training and they did it in the right way and they had a little guidance, they would understand that. So like strength training should always be at the base, right? And then from there, it's like my philosophy is that you do want to try to make things fun. Obviously, in our business, how we make things fun is about like, just the way that we manipulate the program. A lot of it is social interaction. Our gym is very different in the fact that many gyms you'll go to that are group fitness based, they're going to be a little bit more like you might be able to slide into a class and like not talk to anybody all day.
Yeah.
I actually think there's a time and a place for that, and those types of businesses probably need to exist because some people are not going to the gym to be social.
Yeah.
But we believe strongly that the average person needs, or most of the time, are going to benefit from a little bit more social time in their day, based on like a lot of people working from home, etc. So we manipulate our classes in a way where people are going to interact with each other. And even though sometimes people walk through the doors and they're a little hesitant because they're going to have to talk to somebody they don't know, you start talking to people, you start realizing it brings the best out of humanity because you realize like, oh, people are nice. People are nice. Like this person's interesting. You know what I mean?
I'm trying to think like some of the, because when I was going, there were like times where you would have like a three-person rotation on the same machine, or like you're all part of the same.
And you
sort
might
of like
not be like
series.
overly interacting, but you feel like you're in this little mini team for the day. And then the next time you walk in the door, and this is great for getting people to come back, is like, oh, okay, now I know people. Then it levels up to like, now these people are my friends. Now I go to the gym not just because I want to work out because I know it's good for me, but like I like seeing my friends too. So we manipulate our program in that way. Manipulate sounds like a bad thing, but like we do it on purpose.
By design.
It's by design to make people have to interact, and then they want to come back because of that. And they just like, the main goal, like, when you break down all of these things, it's like you're trying to make yourself, you're trying to be a little happier. You're trying to help people be happier, right?
I love that.
Like social interaction plus getting fit, like that's a combination that helps happiness a lot, right? It just is. So you're interacting with other people that you like, that are like out for your best interest, whether it be your trainer or the other people that are kind of pushing you in class, and then you're like making yourself healthier. It's like, you can boost somebody's happiness with that. You know what I mean? It's like
trying to get to that point of like consistency. If you're happy and you know there's good energy coming from that, then you're gonna want to be there.
You're gonna want to be there.
Like,
exactly.
From my own experience, that's just the battle. Once I'm there, I'm gonna get it done.
100%.
I got to get to the door and get walked
and we
in.
try to make that experience, like, of course I want to go back. Like I know I feel a little bit crappy today, but I like, you start to correlate really quickly. Like I will feel better if I go. Doesn't mean that battle is still not challenging at times. But it starts to become like the obvious choice.
For sure.
Right?
When you're like thinking about, working with a new client, maybe one-on-one or even in person, at what point do you get to nutrition? Do you just try to establish gym, fitness, physical first?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Then, how do you go about that?
Because I don't think there's a right and wrong there, but in general, we do try to knock out one thing at a time. So when somebody's making a big change in life, in general, usually the reason that many people are not successful as they try to change too many things at once. So if you're adding a very large habit and making a big change, we usually would recommend to people that you should just make that one change until we feel like we have it locked in.
Yeah.
And that would be the point where getting to nutrition would make sense.
Definitely.
There are going to be some people that like, they kind of push it. They're like, I want to change it all. And sometimes it's like really just having a conversation. There are certain people that can do that. But if I was to put percentages on it, I would say 20% of people can probably make a lot of big changes at once and make it sustainable. And probably 80% need to stick with a small change first.
You're upsetting way too much.
Yeah.
You're trying to make way too many changes.
It's why that so many people struggle, because they look in the mirror one day. They like, there's frustration that builds up. They look in the mirror one day and they're like, I need to do something big. Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to like nobody gets excited or looks in the mirror, gets upset at themselves and is like, you know what? I want to make some small changes over time. So 3 years from now, I'm really fit, right? That's very unnatural to think.
Your internal voice is there.
Never like that, right? So we get it. Like you understand all of that.
Yeah.
But we also know what works. So we're going to try to like really help people and have those conversations to get them to understand that. And I think when there's a little bit of trust there, and a lot of that is like, we're lucky now that we've been in business for about 8 years. That's I think people walk in with a little bit of trust because of the brand that we've built, because a lot of times they've had friends that have come to our gym, etc. So they walk in with a little bit of trust. So when you maybe tell them something that is a little different than what they believe, they're a little bit more open-minded to it. Not to say that's 100%.
Yeah.
But
it's a good point.
Yeah.
You built some equity where it's like, all right, they know what they're talking about. Like they can say some stuff that might be a little off of my core philosophy I developed last night, looking in the mirror after a shower.
100%. Yeah, that's a good way to word it, for sure.
What when you're thinking about, like, I don't know, it's funny in today's world, I feel like you go on any social media site and there's the next hot like supplement, there's the next hot diet, there's the next, like, what is nutrition in your opinion? Like in general, how do you decipher it, just for like what a day could look like, or what has worked for you in a way of like
so it's challenging, and full disclosure, I know a lot about nutrition and I've studied it plenty, but I'm not a nutritionist. We want to always guide people in like the simplest ways. So like you're going to break down somebody's diet, you're going to try to see what some of these big glaring things are that are going to be holding them back. Quite often we deal with a lot of females, but for males too, quite often one of the biggest changes that you can make in your diet that's going to help you, especially if you're working out, but for everybody, it would be more protein. Yeah. Most people, if you break down, you actually have them write out what they're eating. They're not just somewhat short on protein, they're significantly short on protein. And if you can change that, protein fills you up. So therefore you don't end up eating a lot of extra crap. So if you just start with that one block, which is get more protein in, and obviously we'd want to get more specific than that. For sure. For most people, somewhere between, not to get like into decimals, but like about 0.75 to a pound, so per pound of body weight, about 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And probably even if you're on the lower end of that, you're probably going to be pretty good, but you'd be amazed at how much lower most people are. And then again, I'm going to like specify females. Sometimes you might have a female that, based on those numbers, needs 120 grams of protein a day, and then you might analyze it and she's getting 30. Wow, right? Yeah. So, and a lot of times those people, they're blind to it. So what they might come in and say, I get some protein in, and in their mind, they're like, I eat some protein at 1 meal a day. Like that's not gonna do it. You know what I mean? And again, there's like a lot of different ways that can affect you negatively. It's going to make you more hungry for the other crap that you shouldn't be eating. But also in terms of your workouts, especially if you're working out hard, you're just not going to be able to adapt to those workouts without giving yourself those building blocks to allow your body to receive those benefits. Yeah.
So that's like lowest hanging fruit.
Lowest hanging fruit. Yeah. So like if I was to say like a core philosophy, it's not like cut carbs, anything like that. It's like start out with trying to get your protein in. But really, it would be hard for me to even say that I have a nutrition philosophy, because I think there's a lot of ways to go about it. But starting with protein, and then it really is like in terms of like how you would help an individual, it's almost always going to be pretty individualized based on like where they're going wrong. But in general, like processed foods, a lot of times they're not going to be very filling. I don't think we should cut all of them out by any means, because a lot of times there's a convenience there. But processed foods and like added sugars and all that stuff, what you do is you end up you eat and you're not satisfied, and then you just eat more and eat more and eat more. So if you can eat whole foods, if you can get your protein in, a lot of things take care of themselves from that point. But yeah, I mean, any demonization of like certain food groups or, you know, there's like, that's like huge on social media these days, which is like, I have this one way, like carnivore would be an example, or vegan. And it's like, there can be actually benefits to both of those, but it's like, you don't have to go to that extreme. And again, unless you're doing that for some reason, like, you know, about your beliefs, like there's no reason you have to go to that extreme at all. Like there's some small changes that you can make. Enacting those changes is challenging though. It just is because
going from 20 or 30 grams of protein to 120.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like,
well, again, I have a lot of empathy for people. And I think a lot of trainers don't think this way, as I believe we're in a time period where going to the grocery store and like ignoring all of these hyper palatable foods that are like cheap, it's really hard to do. It's just really hard. I mean, we're like, there's so much temptation.
Oh yeah.
So like you might do good for a week.
And everything's branded so nicely and the colors are so there and it looks so yummy. You know, you walk down any aisle and you're like, oh,
exactly.
Over there on this little,
I mean, they know what they're doing. I mean, it's all marketing. But they, you know, you might do good for a week, but then you have like a stressful day, and maybe you go to the grocery store that day, and you're like, okay, then you're just right back to square one.
That's right.
So I think it's super challenging, and I think if people are really struggling with it, I highly encourage them to, even if it's for a short period of time, just work with a professional to just see what are the low hanging fruit things here that I can change in my diet. And a lot of times you're just going to get a ton of knowledge from that. A lot of people, whether it's personal training, nutrition coaching, like they think if I start this, I have to do it forever. But if you're a person that is open-minded to like learning, you're not going to become an expert, but you're going to know a lot more after a couple months of that. And you ask a lot of questions, you're going to know a lot more. You're basically just going right to the source of a person that
around what's going on in your life.
100%. And it is. But I mean, like nutrition science is always changing. And that's why I try not to say too much of like this philosophy is mine.
This is the one.
There's a lot of different ways you can go with it. There's a lot of different right ways. And I would say that it's even true about fitness, maybe a little less so. Nutrition, like there's a lot of right paths, but there's some baselines, and getting enough protein is a baseline that pretty much everybody needs.
I love that one. That's one that I constantly need to be reminded of. You know, the other aspect of nutrition, I guess, goes into the supplementation of everything, which is another one where it's like there's another hot angle on. Do you incorporate supplementation?
I do. Yeah. So I really am a big believer in supplementation, but I do believe that you always want to check the big rocks first. Quite often the people that are asking about supplementation are asking before, like, so you might want to ask them a question beforehand as a trainer. Are you going for daily walks, like, and getting sunshine? Like, so like, I'm trying to take it down to like the base, what's the most basic thing that we could be doing before that? And it's like the person that is not even going for walks, maybe isn't going to the gym consistently, their diet is all over the place. They're the ones that ask about supplementation quite often. And they're the person that's like step 12, right?
Interesting.
So it doesn't mean...
So to you, it's almost like a red flag of like, oh, you started there.
You're trying to, a little bit, but it's more like we're just trying to take shortcuts, right? And that's very natural. I don't judge people for it, but it's like, the goal would be like start with like the lowest hanging fruit. Because if you're having a hard time creating these very basic habits, you're probably not even going to take your supplements anyway, right? But I do believe
look good on the pantry lined up
for sure. I do believe a good multivitamin. I think for people that work out, especially creatine is extremely well studied and very beneficial and very misunderstood. Many people think like, oh, it's going to make me too big or it's going to make me bloated. All of that's BS. It's actually the most well studied nutritional supplement that has any correlation to fitness, like by a long shot, by like 100 times. By like 100 times.
I'm super uneducated on creatine. I mean, what should people know about creatine?
Creatine so first of all, it's already created in your body. So like whenever you hear that, that's not always a red flag because something isn't created in your body, but it should make you feel better if something's already created. We're basically putting something that's what we call bioidentical in your body, right? So you should feel better about that. It means your body's going to know how to process it.
Definitely.
So essentially what you do when you take creatine is you're going to bring more water to your muscles. And when we bring more water to our muscles, they're going to be able to have better endurance, better power.
Okay.
So like that's what it is. So it's during the workout itself, you're going to be able to just have higher output. The other thing that creatine does that most people don't realize is actually really good for the brain as well. So yeah, it's like a nootropic. You probably know that word, right? Yeah. So it's like it's a nootropic
Alpha
as well.
brain.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so it's great for that. And there's just like there's no side effects. There's like no drawbacks. You might retain a little bit of water over the first couple weeks, and then after that, like what it's going to do is help fill your muscles up with water during the workout, but that muscle essentially filters through, and it's not going to make you extra bloated or anything like that.
So I mean, normal person works out, once a day, 4 or 5 times a week. They're doing, little cardio and like how often is it a daily supplementation?
It's a daily supplementation, and when you take it doesn't matter. So it'll essentially just like it'll slowly build up into your system.
Yeah.
So as long as you're consistent with it, doesn't matter when you take it. It's not like a pre-workout. It is essentially going to just work all the time, kind of like work when you need it.
It's so when you brought that up, for some reason I'd have like flashbacks to high school. Everyone's like taking creatines. I just want big muscles.
And it will not hinder that process. It will help that process. But like there is definitely a strong argument that people, even if they don't have those goals, it's just going to benefit. If you could get 10%, like a 10% boost on a thing you're already doing 100%. And know you don't have side effects, that's the best way to word it. Like it's scientifically proven. 10% strength boost with no side effects. Like duh, right?
Yeah. All right, let's check it out.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
a good one.
It's cheap too. It's cheap, and most of the supplements out there's certain supplements that are a little bit harder to make that you tend to get a lot of crap. Whereas like creatine is actually pretty cheap to make. So therefore, like even like the off brands, they're usually still going to be quality. Because usually when you see the fuckery, for lack of a better word, with supplements, is it's an expensive thing to make. So we're going to try to put fillers and other crap in there because we're trying to make it cheaper, right? We're trying to make it cheaper for us. So you might not know the difference.
Cut it down
exactly. So whereas with creatine, it's already cheap, so they just don't feel the need for that. So like you can feel pretty confident that most creatine monohydrate, if you buy that, you can feel confident that you're probably going to be getting it, even if you were just going straight off Amazon.
Interesting. In my head, I'm always trying to figure out I'm trying to get to the point where it's almost like a checklist for the day. It's like, I can't have 20 things, but maybe I can have like 5 to 8. And it's like, the workout, if it's the supplement, if it's the protein, like in your day-to-day life, how do you think about attacking the day?
Yeah. Well, it's actually kind of funny because like I am not really a checklist person. I would call myself a little bit less organized than I would like to be. But because this is, and I try to always think about it this way, because this is kind of like, this is who I identify as a health and fitness person. So those habits tend to be easier for me. So for other people, it's going to be a little bit more challenging.
Because to you, it's probably just like, this is what I do. This is who I am. I am
100%.
I've been doing this for.
So I try to recognize that, and again, as trainers, we try to meet people and understand that that's not who they are. So like while it's easy for you to be like, of course I'm going to take my creatine as a fitness professional or somebody that like is an athlete.
For sure.
For somebody else, it's like, man, that's like just not really the main thing on my mind, right? So you want to try to find ways to make that easier. But yeah, in general, most supplements, not always, that you could take them in the morning and you can just get that knocked out. So like you just try to make it easy. I mean, I know people want to make their kitchens look nice and pretty, but like I would recommend, you're going to get coffee in the morning, have your supplements right next to it. So it's like super obvious, and it's just like this, I get my coffee, that's a habit. And then my other habit is right next door, right? Don't hide it somewhere. I know, especially like my wife, she'll put stuff in like the back of the cabinet because it doesn't look pretty.
Where's my creatine?
Yeah, exactly. But when it comes to making habits, you want to make it super obvious, right? You want to make it like right in front of your face. So yeah, I mean, if I was to make a supplement checklist though, for like pretty much anybody could probably benefit from vitamin D. Most people are not getting enough sunlight. We spend a lot of time indoors, especially during the winter. We actually don't get as much sunlight. So even if you're outside, you might not get enough. Vitamin D is going to change. It can really dramatically change just the way that you feel in terms of energy levels. And, lack of vitamin D can lead to depression. So that's seasonal defective disorder. Affective.
Depression?
Seasonal. Yeah. We're going to say.
Depression?
Yeah. There's like a disorder. The word in the middle. I'm going to have to look that one up. So we're going to. We're going to edit that in with like somebody else's, somebody smart sounding saying it. So you have that. You have vitamin D. You have a multivitamin. That's definitely like, most people are just not getting the basics in their day, in their diet, unless it's super diverse. So a multivitamin would make sense. And then creatine for those who work out. Even if you don't work out, obviously most people that don't work out are just not even going to be thinking about creatine. But if you're working out at all, definitely creatine. And then the last one would be magnesium. And usually you're going to take that at night.
Okay. So my girlfriend started doing that.
Magnesium will help you sleep better. It's going to help you recover from workouts better. It can be relaxing, although like even if you take it in the day, it's not going to relax you so much that it's going to change anything. But most of us are there's some statistics out there that most of us are very short on magnesium in our diets, and that can be a life changer as well. So if I was to make the checklist of the basics, those would be the ones.
That's great.
So it's only about 4 long, and I think that would be like almost everybody needs those. Yeah.
Do you worry a lot about sources for protein?
Yeah, I think that the sources do matter. I think that as long as you're looking at the back of and I'm not a big fan of like, if you look at the back of a label and you see something you don't recognize, that automatically makes it bad. I don't think that that's true.
Yeah, that gets a lot. Yeah, there's a lot.
But in general, you should be looking at the back of a label of a protein. And it should have a couple things in there. It should be like, maybe there's like a stevia or artificial sweetener, probably not going to kill you. That's okay. And then you're basically, it should be like protein and like maybe some other, maybe one other thing that's going to help preserve it.
You don't want a laundry list, but
if you got a laundry list, and you know the ones that like, all right, I don't see this adding any benefit other than the fact that like a lot of it's just like things that they do for flavoring, things that they do for to keep it shelf stable, etc. And but there's definitely some brands better than others, but in general, like when you're looking at stuff like that, if you can see that the ingredient list is not a laundry list, you're probably in good shape.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of whey protein. Whey isolate tends to be one that works for most people because the whey isolate actually, it removes the lactose. So a lot of people, like even if it's just mild, they can have some resistance to lactose, so it can upset their stomach.
Gotcha.
So essentially you get the protein, but they take away the lactose, and then it works well for your stomach, and it gets right into your system.
Balancing like foods versus protein supplement.
Yeah, that's a good question. For
supplementation, is that even a worthwhile question?
There's definitely a lot of fitness professionals out there like eat whole foods, blah, blah, blah. And they try to push that. But this is, what makes our approach at Heat, myself and our team, very different, or at least a little bit different. There's definitely other people that align with this, is that you don't want to approach in this idealistic way. Yeah. Because what happens is it's like, some things that, some of these people will be saying, these fitness professionals, it's like, that's true, but is the person that you're telling to do this gonna do that, right? So like, if the person can get 50% of their, or maybe 75% of their food from whole foods, but 25, the only way they're going to hit their numbers, the numbers they want to get to, is with supplementation. Even if you called supplementation like a notch or two down from like eating a chicken breast with a protein shake, you would rather have them get to the numbers because it's still going to be very healthy. So hopefully that makes sense. Like you want to make it where it's going to be doable for you. So if you could go to straight to a farm and get all of your food straight from there, that's ideal.
It's some ideal.
Is it going to happen though, right? And a protein shake is very accessible.
For sure.
So therefore, and a high quality protein shake, there's really no drawbacks to it. So to be anti-protein supplementation, and I don't think there's that many people out there that are, but some of these more idealistic people, they would say like, only whole foods, nothing processed. Like the term processed is a little bit overblown. Like certain things are processed and can still be healthy, right? So like a protein shake or mix is processed, but if there's only a couple ingredients in there, like that's going to be fine for you. And I highly encourage people to do it.
Man, I like what you're saying about like making stuff that's reachable for people, or like that can actually be executed on, because a lot of the stuff that I feel like I see, even with friends, it's like the $1,000 thing, or like the farm, like that stuff is so expensive.
Yeah,
like you're gonna blow your budget in a week of just like trying to be at this holy grail of like the blue collar mentality. I feel like
For sure.
You gotta connect the dots there to make it consistent.
You have to. And, it really does fight a little bit of human nature.
For sure.
Because like it's way sexier to do a cold plunge than it is to like go out for a walk. And maybe you go out for a walk like in the cold, right? And it's like gonna do similar stuff, right? Yeah. And one is like extremely accessible and cheaper. Yeah. It might not be the exact same.
Cheaper.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite as effective.
Yes,
but like
maybe not quite as effective, but pretty effective.
Yeah.
So like quite often people just jump over all of these. Like people just in general, when you present them with a simple solution to a problem, they're often going to be resistant to it because it almost sounds too simple. It's a weird human nature thing.
For sure.
It's a really weird, because we're fighting ourselves.
Yeah.
We'd rather go to the thing that is going to be like much harder to reach, much harder to do, maybe more expensive, that sounds like maybe a little bit more of a quick fix than like these things that are like tried and true and we know work because they just sound too boring. Like people walking is like, I said it a bunch, but like walking is like so boring to the average person when you say it that they're just going to dismiss you.
Dismiss it 100%.
But we know for sure. I mean, if you look in like places like Europe where people don't really work out, but they walk all the time, like they're not obese. A lot of that has to do with the food that they have over there too. But it's like, if you get your steps in, like that takes that's a big chunk and you'll feel better even if it's cold outside. Like you're going to get back from a walk and you're going to feel de-stressed. You're going to feel so much better. And you're going to, again, we're not talking about the calorie burning game, but it is still a real thing. It's not what we want to focus on, but if you walk every day, like and get like your 7 or 10,000 steps in, like that will add up.
Yeah, I loved when I was first like I guess trying to start the habit. This was actually like square one was walking, and I got to credit my girlfriend for it because she was doing like 10,000 steps a day, and I was like, you know what, I like that. I like having the number. Right. I like that it's super trackable on my phone, and I would do the 10. It was like an hour and a half, I think it would take me, and I had like this lap. And that was, I think, the first 60 or 90 days of just trying to get back into working out consistently with just walking.
Yeah.
And you're right. It feels great.
It feels great.
Oh my gosh.
It feels great. And it adds up more, even if you're one of those people that's hyper fixated on how it's going to change my body. Yeah. It really even adds up in that regard. You know what I mean? It's not going to add up to the same as what like strength training would, but it really can add up. And then when you start to combine those two things, like you're doing some strength training and you're walking, it's like you can really change your body.
Yeah,
it compounds
in
for
a
sure.
major way.
Yeah. But there's just so many other benefits too, like getting out in the sunshine. Like, I mean, we are really fighting our natural evolution in a lot of ways. We spend so much time inside and like people, if they literally would just get like outside for like 1 hour a day, they don't realize how much anxiety, stress relief, all of that would, but it's like so simple that even if they hear it, they're like, there's no way. I literally had a conversation with my family one time, and was talking to them about how that could be beneficial because a couple family members struggle with anxiety, and my wife and I were both there, and it was like the commentary back was like, you don't understand like that like my thing is so much more than what walking could help, but it's like and they might be right, but they usually won't try. Wow. And that is super, super common. And that is super common. And it's a little bit sad because it's like, I'm not guaranteeing you that this is going to change your life, but you should definitely give it a shot because it's pretty simple and it probably could help.
Wow. Yeah. Do you find that you have to, or do you do a lot of advocating within your family for things? Like
it's always really challenging with family members, but I mean, the amount of like programs I've written for like my mom and my sister that have like never been used, it's like but I don't give up. Yeah. I've bought my mom a personal trainer before that she used for a little while, but people have to make the decisions for themselves. There's days, my family's in Pennsylvania. I live here in North Carolina. So there's days that I feel a little bit bad because I do think if I could hold their hand, I think that they'd be able to get there. So there's like a little bit of guilt there, but I think like, since we have all that distance between us, like especially, it's already going to be hard to try to convince a family member to do something that they're resistant to doing in the first place. But then, the distance between us makes it even harder, right?
For sure. I'm curious, like with even the one-on-one, maybe this is more applicable, but what have been, I guess, sort of triggers that get people to being consistent? Have you found like, I love what you said about putting the supplements next to the coffee maker. Like that to me is just like such an easy applicable thing. But like when you try to take that to going to the gym or something, like how have you helped program the mind in a way of like, getting that to be a part of something for
the one thing that we have going for us as personal trainers is that quite often when we get somebody through the doors that we're working with is they have an accountability set up in the fact that they're making appointments. Doesn't mean people always show up, but it definitely helps. So I would always start with that. I understand that having a personal trainer in your budget is not always going to be something that everybody can pull off. But if it is in the budget, even for a short period of time, to get the habit going, having somebody that you're accountable to, and that doesn't necessarily need to be a personal trainer, although that's probably like at the top.
Well, let's be real. In some cases, it could be like, don't buy the expensive supplements.
100%.
Just get the accountability partner and do the personal training.
Absolutely. And and I think a lot of people, I mentioned this before, it's like they think if I hire a personal trainer, it needs to be forever. No, it's like to get that habit, to gain some knowledge. And then, quite often you can have a nice little runway there to like keep it going yourself.
Oh, nice.
So I would always start with that if it's an option. Obviously, I'm a little biased there. It's what I do. But the next step down would be like an accountability partner. So like a friend, somebody to work out with.
Nice.
The challenge is getting to the gym. I do think that is not, some people would say that's like the only challenge. If you get there, it's great. It's like, well, no, there's a second level to that. You can go to the gym and do some bullshit, and it's not going to help that much. It might help a little bit, but it's not going to help that much. So I think sometimes that's too simplistic.
I saw the guy on this is so funny. I saw this guy on the machine the other day. The dip machine. So I guess his workout was to arms on the dip machine and do bicycle legs. Have you seen this before?
No, I haven't seen that one exactly.
That was the workout.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey man, credit for being here, but like,
for sure.
to your point, there is an ineffective.
I do. There's like a common thing. It's like if as long as you're doing something, it's like, think about it in your own industry. It's like that's not necessarily like just doing something is not actually. It's like that is a start, but like if we're talking on the 100% scale, we're at 1%. You're doing something, but like you got to kind of get an idea of what you're doing because there's science behind when it comes to exercise. There's science behind what works and what doesn't. Getting moving definitely is a start, but there's a lot of people that have been going to the gym for 10 years and they're spinning their wheels because they've never given themselves a chance to actually learn what works. And they're just in this routine, but it's like a routine of stuff that's just not effective, right?
Yeah, I get that.
So I do always believe that, and there is a lot of good, there's a ton of bad information out there, but there's a lot of good information too. For some people, it might be their accountability might just be following a program of a trusted professional, and there's accountability there. But like, if you can have human accountability, meaning like a coach, a workout partner, somebody that you go to the gym with, family member, that's always, and it's not always easy for people, but that's where I would always start because quite often that is going to help you create the habit.
No, I get that. Just getting, if you need a little like boost to get you there, but then you can run with it yourself.
Then you can run with it for sure. Yeah.
This is sort of a selfish question, but I'm curious when you talk to people like, and you're going into sort of either steering or directing how they conduct their weight training, do you emphasize this whole like high reps versus high weight situation? Do you think there's one default for someone who's on their own?
So the good news about weight training is one thing that we know for sure is that training close to failure is actually the most important part. So the reps matter less. The reps matter less in general. So there is a lot of flexibility there. Usually, if you're training for lower weight, high reps, you're not going to actually build as much strength. So the higher weight, if your goal is also, I want to change my body and I want to build strength, you want to at least spend some time with lower repetitions and higher weight. But in general, if somebody was to go to the gym on their own and they were like, I just like doing higher reps with lower weight, like we can get you some really good results with that. So in general, in our program, just because we know that some people veer towards it, there's like a nice mix. So there's really not a right or wrong. But one thing that I'll hammer home is that this is just a straight up myth, is that lighter weights for higher reps are going to lead to more of like a toned look. That is still a very, very common idea. And there's no truth. There's no truth to that whatsoever.
I think I've heard you talk about that before. So you helped steer me on that one.
There's no truth to that at all. So it's like this, and it's like on the flip side, it's like somebody that wants to get toned a lot of times is going to often be scared of lifting heavy because they think they're going to turn into the Incredible Hulk. And it's like, as somebody that's trying to look like the Incredible Hulk, exactly. Well, quite often, and I love all my ladies, but quite often it's females that feel that way. And we definitely get it with guys too. So I don't want to call them out, but it's females who, in general, if you understand female physiology, they have extremely low levels of testosterone, which is one of the main drivers of muscle growth. Yeah. So it's a female that is the most nervous about lifting heavy because they're going to get too big. When if you just if they understood the science, which you try to explain to people, is it's like, even if you try your absolute hardest, like ask a girl who's trying to get jacked how impossible it is. It's possible, but like quite often it's why girls that are trying to do that, they might resort to like, supplementation that's maybe not necessarily legal, things of that nature. Because the
pharmaceutical supplementation.
Yes, exactly. The female hormone profile, it makes it really challenging to build excessive amounts of muscle. So like to assume, and it is like a little bit laughable, but I try to empathize when somebody comes to me and is like, I don't want to lift heavy. A female comes to me and says, I don't want to lift heavy because I want to get jacked. It's hard not to chuckle because it's like, if you understand, like there's no chance
not gonna happen.
There's no chance that happens. You know what I mean? Unless you just absolutely crush and eat tons of food for 5 years, you're never going to wake up and look in the mirror and be like, I'm just so big.
You're over that 0.75 protein.
No, you're like for a long time. Yeah, for a long time too. Like it's an unrational or irrational fear.
Yeah. What other kind of roadblocks do you face with, I guess, like that male-female dynamic is interesting. Are there other like roadblocks with either or that you have to?
Well, the one thing that I will say, so I kind of just threw the girls under the bus, so I'm going to give some props here, is in general, and I do think social media, although I think there's a lot of places where it's maybe not helping the fitness industry, I think one thing about social media that has helped is that strength training has become much more common for females to be interested in strength training. That has gotten really balanced out. So like back in the day, so we have strength classes and classes at our gym that are more conditioning based, cardio based. We used to have to pull teeth to get the girls to come to the strength class. Now our strength classes are packed with girls, and they're not like in there reluctantly. They're in there because they want to get strong. So I absolutely love that. It's been great for our business because it's always been our business model. But in the beginning, we had to like try to get them in there, and now it's just like they come for it. So I love that. But it's getting a little bit more balanced out. I think that females are starting to look at fitness similar to how guys are, and a lot of them are really embracing getting stronger, being okay with putting some muscle on.
Definitely.
So I love that. But I mean, I would say that in general, females, another thing that I'll build them up on, it's a little bit easier to get females to focus on trying to do things correctly, whereas guys are like the bros to throw them under the bus. So like it's called ego lifting. It's like there is something about like I'm trying to lift as much weight as I possibly can, but throwing form out the window, throwing all the science of like best approaches out the window, and we try to convince people it's like that's gonna hold you back. So you might have physically moved that weight from point A to point B, but you're like sacrificing your shoulder health in the process, and probably didn't even help yourself build more muscle. So you got to ask yourself what the goal is. Is the goal move the weight from point A to point B? You probably not.
I needed to go over here. That's all you did, my guy. Like, congratulations.
And that's a great breakdown. That's exactly what it is. And it's like, is that your goal? But nobody, if you actually could get them in a conversation, it's like, of course that's not your goal. You know what I mean? Is your goal to like impress the person across the gym? Maybe in that moment, yes. But like, no, you probably, most people, they come into the gym to be healthier, make sure they stay injury free. And for many people, which I'm totally in support of this, it's to like change your body. Well, ego lifting and throwing weights around is not a great way to change your body in an efficient way. Right? It's maybe a good way to like make yourself feel a little better about yourself in the moment, but it's not a great way. If your goal is to actually make change in your body, controlling weights, using proper technique, and that doesn't mean perfection. It just means like we know the difference between like I use a little bit of momentum on that exercise and like I'm throwing the shit out of this weight. You know what I mean? I'm like using my hips on a bicep curl. Like we know that's the big difference, right?
Dude, the social media thing is so interesting because I mean you hit on like a positive of it, but like it's such a trend friendly thing in the fitness world. I mean, like when you look online, what do you see that you're excited about? And then like on the other side of things, I mean, it seems like there's probably more on the negative than the positive.
It's sadly true. I do think some of the best information you could possibly get is on social media in terms of fitness and health. But I think if I was to put numbers on it, for every 99 or for every 100 posts, there's probably one good one for every 99 that's just absolute BS. Yeah. And it's like that's where I feel a little upset about like the state of social media and like where that's gone, because quite often I think many people that are putting the content out there, many of them actually do know. They do know, and it's not like right or wrong, but they know some of the things they're saying are misleading.
Got it.
And that gets frustrating. If there's like a 22-year-old kid that just like is like searching for the thing that's going to get them the most engagement, and they're probably just copying that post from somebody else they saw, I judge them a little less. I hope they come around one day, but they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
They're going to obviously come off as an expert, and people are going to believe it, so that's not good. But I don't blame them as much. But when somebody's been in the industry for a long time, and they're like, I just know if I push out this type of information that it's going to put money in my pocket, and it's going to get a lot of people to hit that like button.
Yeah.
And they
sell my course,
and they know that it's not the most optimal thing for people, and maybe even harmful at some points. That's pretty frustrating, and it's super common.
Yeah.
It's super common.
Are there people online that you are like, hey, this is a good person?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a guy named Marcus Philly I like a lot.
Okay, I don't know that one,
he has some great programs.
Yeah.
He used to be a CrossFit guy, but he's like, so he understands CrossFit. He understands that people want to work hard, but he basically like kind of like filtered that system down to like something that's a little bit more simple. He calls it functional bodybuilding. So it's like this combination. Like this is like exactly like kind of how we approach it. The gym.
It sounds similar to the heat philosophy.
We want people to help people get stronger. We want to help people feel more athletic, but we also understand that people want to change the way their bodies look.
Yeah.
So to like try to force feed somebody to let's just focus on getting stronger and more athletic. It's like most people walk through the doors because they want to look better in the mirror, right? So we might have to convince them why being stronger and more athletic is great. And once they start to experience it, so like that's why you're going to try to balance those two. And he does a really good job of that.
Nice.
I'm trying to think of people that would be like a little bit more accessible. Jason and Lauren Pak, they're a couple.
Yeah.
They really break down a lot of like exercises. They have a very good philosophy.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, they're two great ones that I think, you know, I follow a lot of people that are a little bit more like geared towards educating fitness professionals.
Yeah, I get that.
So a lot of times, it's a little bit of a different audience, and they have really good information. But those are two great people to follow. And it's a little bit sad, obviously, that like I'm coming up with two people, right? I think I could definitely come up with a couple more.
Probably come up with a bunch of like trash that you've seen recently.
No, I could come up with it for sure. I could come up with it. It's definitely way more. And like, you know, you spend more time on Snapchat and TikTok, but like from what I know and have heard is actually Instagram in general is probably significantly higher quality, and I'm spending time on Instagram actually because like the shorter the video,
you're helping filter out some of the BS, but it's still
for sure. Yeah, so I think like the shorter form content, like they're trying to catch you, and a lot of times they know like I'm saying a thing that's probably not true, but I know I'm going to be able to catch you here because we talked about that human nature thing, which is more of that quick fix mentality. It's like, so here's like something you wanted to like you would want to look out for if you're looking for like something like to put a red flag on something. It's like, here's this one thing that I did that changed my journey, right? There's no like one thing, one thing, right? And there's like a million posts like that. Million posts like that. So it's like, here's this one core exercise that like, and then they'll talk about the fact that like that core exercise like changed the way their core looked forever.
Sure.
Like, and it's like, that's just like, if you know anything about that. So like,
you missed right on the hook. The hook just set it up for
exactly. And I mean, you know, it's in, you know, people are just chasing engagement and they know what works. And it makes me a little bit sad because it's like that stuff wouldn't work if people didn't engage with it. So it goes to show that we just have a lot more to learn as a society because we do really very clearly we get sucked into that. You know what I mean? I'm happy if I get 100 likes on a post that I feel like is very educational. Whereas then I'll see something that's like, not only is that, you know, do I not agree with it? This is like actually like false information. It's misleading information. It might have a couple 100,000 likes on it. I'd be lying to say I don't get frustrated at that. Not because personally I'm jealous. It's because I'm sad. You know what I mean?
For sure. It's also, and some of it's almost like fitness porn in a way.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like,
absolutely.
What are they really watching this video for?
And if we're talking about red flags, another one would be so the one thing, you know, this one thing changed. That's number one. But number two would be like, listen, I'll be the first one to tell you that I have definitely like every 10th post, I might be working out with my shirt off. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
I do believe that like being fit does create a little bit of trust from people. You know what I mean? I'm in my 40s. I'm just like, yeah, I do this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But when every single post is 100% shining a light on that person's physique, that means that they're making up for the fact that they probably do not actually have the information. They're trying to suck you in with the fact that they look good. And then we must remember that quite often, just because somebody looks good, a simple one would be that they might just have great genetics, but most likely, a lot of times, not most likely, but often, those people get to those physiques in unsustainable ways that are not necessarily ways that you want to get there yourself.
Yeah, or they're juicing and acting like it happened
one,
because they
that's
drink
one
a
of
green
them.
juice.
With
it's
females that are like very thin, it's probably like they might literally have
Ozempic or like
or they might have an eating disorder.
That's true.
Like all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's very natural to look at somebody and say, they have the body type that I like, so therefore they must know how to help me get there. But those things are not correlated at all. They're not correlated. To be able to get your own body, talking about the influencer, to look a certain way does not at all qualify you to help somebody else get to that
the shortcuts you made
to get to that place.
Whatever.
Yes, for
and
sure.
You hit on this earlier, but it's like your mind wants it to be that easy. Like you want it to be the one thing.
100%.
And then in your head, you're like, oh yeah, it's that one thing. If I do that, when you forget all about like the walk, you forget all about the protein. Like it's
absolutely. And these influencers, in a lot of ways, and again, many of them are just like grabbing from somebody else, but the ones that are coming up with the stuff from scratch, they're actually brilliant in a way. They know what they're doing. They understand. They've at least learned how human psychology works, and they know what's gonna work. So they tap into that.
Point.
So in a way, they're not idiots, but they're not helping people. They're not helping people. Like it's self-serving. It's not about trying to help somebody get from point A to point B.
I always go to see if there's a link in the bio to some sort of digital course, and then I'm like, you know what, let's just pump the brakes a little bit on whether or not this guy's preaching the gospel right now.
100%. Yeah, and I mean, and there's obviously people that sell digital courses that still have good information.
Yeah, there are.
So it's not automatic by any means, but there's a lot of people out there that are, they're telling you what you want to hear. That's like, and what you want to hear quite often is that I can help you I can help you take a shortcut. I can help you make this process be quicker.
I've got
than
the
what
secret.
Yes,
I've got
because
the
to
secret
say,
sauce.
hey,
when the sauce is really
go for a walk into the gym. Yeah, exactly.
There you
go.
yourself with the sauce.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, you'd be surprised. Even females, man. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there between like peptides and all these things, and a lot of them like. I'm not even necessarily judgmental that people do them. Some of them are legal, etc. But it's just misleading.
The false front of
right? And I don't know, like, if people need to share their business, but if you're making it seem like, hey, this workout that I'm showing you is how I got there and nothing else, and you know that you're getting all of this assistance that you're not talking about, well, it's just disingenuous. You know what I mean?
Dude, I'm curious. Over, the last 3 years, there's been all kinds of different, health concerns and crises and whatnot. Like, what have you seen the impact of that be to the people that you're working with? Have you felt like that's had like a long lasting negative impact on people's mentalities?
For sure. In a way, I'm always paying attention to the big picture, but like, one thing that we're really proud of is that we were able to keep a lot of the people that come to our gym consistent throughout this process. So like, in our little circle, we see that we were able to really help people navigate that, right?
Yeah, they came out pretty good.
They came out pretty good because we kept them going. We tried to keep them motivated, even when a lot of people would want to, stop. So, obviously, if people continued to move their bodies, it's not the only factor when it comes to like depression and anxiety and all that, but it certainly helps a lot.
Yeah.
So within our own little circle, most of our people have stayed pretty happy. They've stayed on course. But then, what we have seen is just many people that, and this is still a positive, that like they got to a really bad place and then they walk through the doors in that spot. And our goal is to try to help them the best that we can to like regain that, whether it be like just stopping working out or gaining a bunch of weight. I mean, there's a bunch of statistics about like during COVID, people have there was a significant amount of obesity that was created during that time period, and a lot of because of the lack of movement. That like when you're like on a lockdown,
for sure,
how are you going to make yourself feel better? Food, right?
When the walk might have been a good alternative.
It would have been a good alternative.
About,
but we're a little bit what's the word? Like the way that we see the world a lot of times is where we spend our day is at the gym.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of happy people because they're coming to the gym regularly, right?
Like, no, everyone's great. They were working out.
I certainly understand that is not the norm.
No, not at all. Yeah. It's interesting, man.
Yeah.
Dude, well, this was so fun, man.
Super fun.
It was fun jamming out, dude. I love that. I love what you said about like no one looks in the mirror and says, "Let me just take one tiny little step." But that's what it comes down to, right?
It's like
it's
baby
steps.
It's quite often it just comes down to like fighting those natural urges. It's really weird that our brains work so much in a way that really kind of fights what we should be doing. Quite often, our natural interaction, our natural reaction is to do the thing that's actually going to push us so far away from where we're trying to go.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Dude, we'll have to do this again, man.
Let's do
that
it.
was awesome.
Yep.
All right.
Cool.
Peace.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Out a little